everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for coming to our Graduate Mentoring Fellows Seminar today on building healthy mentorship relationships. So on campus, we recognize that the most successful mentoring relationships are built on a foundation of mutual respect and benefit. However, understanding how to build a long-lasting and beneficial mentoring can be tricky. Today, our panelists, along with the graduate student mentoring fellows, aim to discuss from experience how to cultivate a better mentoring relationship, approach conflicts, and ensure communication balance. We hope that you'll find this discussion insightful and helpful. With that said, I will now hand it off to our panelists composed of outstanding mentor awardees to better introduce themselves so that I could have everyone mention their name and department affiliation. We do have one of our panelists not here present, so we're hoping that maybe he'll show up.
So I start here, huh? Hi, my name is Audeen Fentiman. I'm a faculty member in engineering education. I've been in this business for 30-some years, so I'm eager to share.
Hi everyone, I'm Ángel Enríquez. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in biomedical engineering. Nice to meet you.
And my name is Chelsea Davis. I am an assistant professor in materials engineering. I've been here 6 years now and looking forward to our conversations as well.
Hi, my name is Rachel Gehr. I'm a PhD student in environmental and ecological engineering. I also one of the College of Engineering mentoring fellows this calendar year.
So thank you. And thank you, of course, for your willingness to join us today. So now we'll start off with our set of questions before allowing our audience to ask any questions. So if you guys have questions, we'll ask 10 to 15 minutes for you guys. So we're going to start off with the topic on mentorship initiation. So the first question is, from a mentor/mentee perspective, what is your brief definition of good mentorship? Whoever wants to start.
I can start with the mentee perspective. I remember when I was applying towards grad school, I was told about the importance of having that mentor or advisor that you can really communicate with, and that you know what set of values you're looking for in that type of relationship. And for me, it was someone who could be direct and not sort of gloss over or sprinkle like nice things into there, or I wanted to be a direct feedback type of person, and that's someone that that's something that I looked towards during the application process. So my suggestion would be just try to know what you're looking for in a mentor, and know yourself, know what you can stand or what you would like in that relationship, and then proceed to look for that.
I think from the mentor's, excuse me, from the mentor's perspective, I think it's really important that you genuinely care about the mentee's professional and personal growth, and that you do as much as you can to help them identify their goals and then to meet them.
Pretty straightforward. I like that. I would agree with all of that. For me, the best mentor-mentee relationships I've had from both sides have been those with the most honest and open communication, right? There can be judgment there, and there should be judgment when you're like correcting somebody's way of thinking in either direction, but just having open communication in the sense of there is a level of trust and a level of comfort that what is said in the mentor-mentee relationship is not going to ruin that relationship, and everyone is going to be respectful and stay in bounds, but articulate their needs and just make themselves understood as quickly as possible, or as clearly as possible, I guess. So communication for me is the most important.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add on to that is to recognize that no two mentoring relationships are going to be the same. So going into that, knowing that the previous relationship you had might look very different, and that's okay. It's just kind of dependent on the context and the goals and the personalities of who the two people are. So just keeping in mind that it can look very different and that it should in certain scenarios.
Going into our second question. So how have you approached your new mentor / mentee relationships to ensure they begin the right way? Examples include characteristics, meeting frequency, check-ins, meeting agendas, things like that.
I think just building on what was said about the developing and mentoring relationships, I think the first thing you have to do is listen carefully and understand the person that you're talking to. Make sure that people understand the expectations in both directions. And it's got to be mutually understood. It can't be one person thinks we're going to do this and the other thinks we're going to do something different, right? And then once again, keep those channels of communication open. So as things change and evolve, you can change the mentoring relationship with it.
And I'll often find myself checking in with my mentees sort of in real time, like in the middle of a meeting, I'll be like, wait, I think we're talking about two different things. What do you think right now? And I'm like, oh, we were speaking different languages. And just being, I guess, vulnerable and open to being like, I don't think I understand what you're trying to tell me. Let's reset. Has been really helpful.
Yeah, I can give an example. Like I said, the opposite was I had a different advisor for my PhD than for my master's. And I was very used to working with my master's advisor and continued reporting things the same way with my new advisor and everything. And she was like, wait, where is this in your report? And why did you plot the graphs this way? And we kind of went back and forth a few times before we were like, okay, wait a second, let's just write out like, what do we want to see in a report? How are things best? What do you want it to look like? What topics do you want to see? And it looked very different from before. Both were great comprehensive reports, but it would have been a lot more helpful if we had clarified that sooner on. So just kind of making sure some of those things we discussed earlier is helpful.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is in the opportunities that I had to like mentor undergraduate students, I always start the conversations with saying, what are you looking to get out of this experience? What do you want to learn? And then let me see if I can actually help you achieve these goals that you have. And if it fits, then I'm more than happy to set up weekly meetings with weekly objectives and continue in that route.
I'll add on to that too. I've been mentoring some high school students recently interested in research. And the one thing that I always include on that first conversation, which I think is especially important these days, is your mental health is important. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed by, you're applying for colleges right now, or you might participate in sports or have clubs on top of academics, and you're still living with your parents, but you don't want to be if you're about to go to college. And there's a lot going on right now. So if you're ever feeling overwhelmed by this extra research project you're doing on top of everything, open and honest, clear communication is important. So just always let me know. We can push deadlines, we can change things up. I can help more than I have been if that's necessary. But just making sure that it's understood. I'm here to help you, not to push you past what you're able to do.
The only thing I would add to that is kind of echoing the expectations. So make sure you understand like how often you're going to meet with your mentor or if you're the mentee. What will you have discussed in every meeting to have a purpose to every meeting? Some advisors can forget about what you said in the prior meeting. So if you have like an agenda to come in or like a follow up your meeting with an email, that's very helpful too. So the third question is, as a mentor, how have you assessed whether your mentoring is being successful?
I'll jump in and say that I think I assess it by whether or not the students are thriving. And if they're not thriving, if they're not making progress, they're not happy with what they're doing, then I need to have a conversation with them to see, are they on the right path? So, and you need to find out as soon as possible that they're not thriving so that you can find some solutions and get them to the place where they're thriving. If it turns out this is the wrong path for them, then you need to find another path.
I feel like a successful mentor-mentee relationship is depending on the engagement on both sides and how the mentee is actively trying to either reach out or going to the meetings and doing their objectives. I recently had an experience where the mentee at the beginning was very active, very focused, trying to like do the work. But over time, that communication slowly started to deteriorate. And I tried to ask him, hey, what's going on? They would say that it was the exams and all the coursework. But slowly we realized that his focus was more onto industry side, and it was better for him to continue on that path.
Yeah, I think the Professor Fentiman's point, like I assess whether or not the relationship has been successful through the outcomes. And not necessarily just has the student published X number of papers, or have they written this many proceedings, or did they get a big fancy postdoc, but also whenever I watch one of my mentees give a presentation or write an abstract and it's just perfect and I have no notes, which doesn't happen often because I'm picky, but when that happens, I will always stop and mark it in like out loud. I will mark it and be like, this is the first time that you have presented X, or this is the first time that you've done this completely on your own. Remember 2 years ago when you couldn't. And that's always a nice way to measure growth and sort of benchmark that we're getting where we need to be as mentor mentee working together.
That's exactly what I was thinking, is kind of looking back when it comes to assessing and thinking, where were you 6 months ago? Where are you now? And if that's the same, then we need to step back and reevaluate how you're trying to meet those goals, and what that relationship looks like. But if you can look back 6 months and say, like, oh man, my writing's improved, I've learned these methods, or I published a paper, and you have those accomplishments, or if it's as simple as like, I wrote a really good abstract and I'm super proud of that. Just having those little steps along the way can be huge ways of having a positive assessment.
So going into the first question, I'll give a little bit of context. So sometimes our graduate students find it a bit intimidating to approach either a faculty member, a research mentor, or anyone related, seeking a new mentor either for a project, research, or for their academics. So how can a mentee best approach a new mentor?
I think one has to come to the realization that professors are people too. They like to talk. They like to be social as well. Once you don't help hold them to such a high degree, you can reach out to them. And I found that
Treat us like people.
I found that as long as you're wanting to reach out, wanting to have that type of relationship, most of the time those professors will be there.
Depending on who the professor is, some of them might not feel really comfortable if you come to them and say, would you be my mentor? They go, whoa, that's a lot of responsibility. Do I want to do this? If you go to them and say, I would really like to have your advice on whatever, or I'd like to hear what you think about whatever. And then you begin to build a relationship that way. You don't have to call it a mentoring relationship, but all of a sudden you've got one.
And that's one of the most important things coming in here that I have in my notes that I wanted to highlight. I don't think there's ever been a moment in my life where I've only had one mentor. If you're in that spot, that's bad. You should fix it. Because different people are good at different things. They have different technical expertise. They might be really great at teaching, but maybe they aren't super productive in research. Or right now I'm speaking as the mentee, as a junior faculty member, right? Or maybe someone is excellent at grant writing and they've had like 1 million successful proposals get funded. Then I'm not looking to just have one mentor be my end all and be all only go-to person. I consider pretty much the entire faculty of my department to be my mentors. And if I have a specific question, I will go to that individual that I know is good at that thing and be like, I need help with this thing. Sometimes that grows into this huge, like it just blossoms into this very sort of organic mentoring relationship that has lasted all 6 years that I've been here, sometimes it's kind of a passing thing. It doesn't have to be so formal as you said.
And not only are some people expert in one thing, some people expert in another. Sometimes you want two mentors who are expert in the same thing because they approach that thing differently. And one approach might fit your personality and your style better than another. Yeah. So it's always helpful to hear other people's opinions, see what they have to offer. You don't have to take everything that your mentor says and do it. In fact, that would not be a good idea in some cases, right?
Sometimes it's physically impossible.
Well, there you go. So anyway, it's useful to ask a variety of people for their opinions on how we proceed.
I think following on Hell's point too, faculty are people, they're approachable. If you're really scared to talk to them, find a paper of theirs and find something interesting and say, hey, I had a question from this paper of yours, because let me tell you how much they would love to answer it for you. And that's a really good way to kind of ease into things, is to start talking about their research and maybe finding out that if it's a research mentor you're looking for, that expertise might align with your project. Or if it doesn't, that's okay too. You've made a connection, you've networked with a faculty member, and you can move on. But yeah, research is always kind of a nice, easy way when it comes to academia to ease into a conversation.
So with that, we wrap up that section and we're moving on to conflict resolution. So the first question is, how can a mentee tell their mentor that they need a different advising style than what is currently being given?
Use your words. I mean, this is the mentors are people too thing, right? Where especially if the student is succeeding or if the mentee is succeeding and outwardly seems to be successful, the mentor might not know that anything is wrong, right? Because there are some super high functioning graduate students at this school that will succeed no matter what, but the mentor might not be giving them what they need. And there's no way for us to know that. We can't read minds. We are not omnipotent. We're people. So you have to use your words. You have to say, meeting once every 8 months is not sufficient for me. Is it possible for us to meet monthly? Or I don't have anything to tell you when we meet every day at 8 a.m. Could we make this weekly? Like, those are changes that we can adjust to our mentees, but we don't know to adjust if you don't tell us to.
One of the things that I will mention is, even though I'm fairly direct, one thing that won't work is to walk into my office and say, hey, this mentoring style, this isn't working for me. That doesn't help me a lot, you know? I need some specifics, like, you're asking me to meet every morning at 8 o'clock. I have 2 preschool kids that I need to take to kindergarten. I can't be here at 8 o'clock, you know? I mean, specifics like that help me to decide, what do we do to change this? I mean, if it's not working, we need to fix it, clearly, but I need some specifics.
That squeaky wheel gets loose.
Yep.
I would chime in and say, this happened during my internship. I had a microaggressive, or at least that's what I learned it's called, the microaggressive mentoring style, when you have someone who needs to meet with you every single day. And for me, it was like, I don't know if I have new things to come in the next meeting when I just had a meeting today and we discussed so many things already. And at first I didn't know how to manage the situation. I asked another mentor and I said, oh, I don't know how to handle the situation. I just feel like all these meetings are unnecessary. I'm not used to having to meet with someone every single day. Best advice was, talk about it. Just bring up why you think you shouldn't be having a meeting every single day. And it sounded so simple, but it was literally the best thing I could have done. And I did. I approached my manager and I said, I understand that you're trying to do your best to help me grow in this company, but I don't think it's the most optimal thing isn't to meet with me every single day, because some of the code that I have to run will take a couple of hours, or will take a couple of days for me to finish. And so I want to make sure that every time I come in and see you, I'm using your time wisely as well. So with that, I'll ask the second question. So what should a mentee do if their mentor becomes unresponsive to emails, Slack messages, or any other platform of communication?
I think committee members can often be underutilized. They're there for a reason. It's not just like an annual meeting to update them. They're part of your dissertation, they're part of your plan. And so if your advisor is in other countries at conferences or working from home a lot, you can't get a response. I would reach out to committee members and say like, hey, I could really use some feedback on this abstract I want to submit, or can you review these data sets for me and make sure I've done everything correctly. And if it's from a research perspective that you really just kind of need some help and some advice or guidance on your project, that's something they can offer. And maybe they can nudge your advisor as well and say like, hey, your student said they couldn't get a hold of you. Is there anything I can do to help with mentorship maybe? But yeah, I would say committee members are really fantastic resource to utilize.
That's the best defense, I think.
Yeah. Well, another approach though is to ask them for a meeting, ask the mentor for a meeting where you say, I really value your feedback. I wish I had more of it. How can I communicate to you what I'm doing so that I can get your feedback? Maybe the person wants a weekly statement of what you're doing, or maybe they need the abstract 2 weeks ahead of when it's due instead of one. There's sometimes just barriers like that you can fix pretty quickly if you understand what the mentor needs.
The third question is, what steps should a mentee take if they do not currently have a healthy mentoring relationship with their mentor?
So I want to make a distinction, or maybe ask the panel if there is a distinction. In my head, there is a clear divide and separation from a dissertation advisor and a mentor. Often that is the same human being. It does not have to be. I think the best and most successful PhD advisors also naturally are mentors to their graduate students. But that is not the role when you sign up for a PhD dissertation advisor. So making sure, I lost my train of thought, but I want to make sure that we make that distinction. Or do you think there is a distinction there?
I think
To the whole panel, does it go without saying that your dissertation advisor must be, and obviously is, a mentor to their PhD students? I know what it should be. That's not my question.
Should be, but it's not always the case. I know plenty of graduate student friends that their advisor is just there to just verify their work and not necessarily know how they're doing in their professional development or towards their goals. And yeah, it's like a checkpoint. So yeah, it's there's definitely that distinction.
I think I'll add on to that too. Ideally, an advisor is the mentor, but regardless of whether or not they are, you should have other mentors. Like you said, if you only have one, let's fix that and get additional people that you can seek guidance from. But if your only mentor is your PhD or master's advisor, it's going to be really difficult to accomplish those goals. Because if the question is, if your research advisor and you have an unhealthy relationship, the best thing you can do is talk to another mentor. Probably reach out to someone else and say, this is what I'm experiencing. Get that kind of third party perspective. Am I crazy? Like, did I do something that doesn't make sense and I'm just not seeing it? Or to kind of get that other point of view. I definitely would get other feedback before just approaching an advisor and saying, I think this is really unhealthy. I think we got to change something. I want to get that other perspective and make sure that it's not just me missing something.
And that's why when I heard that question, it triggered my need to confirm the definition of a mentor.
And I'll be practical about it. Your advisor is the person that has to sign off on the paperwork. And so an unhealthy relationship with that person isn't something you easily sever. right? So one, you try to recognize that it's not going well as soon as possible so that you're in a position to still talk to them about it and maybe fix it, right? If it's past that, then other people that are available to you here would be your graduate chairs, your graduate committee chairs. They're folks who can be of some help. If they happen to be best buddies with your advisor, then maybe you want to skip that step. Okay. and talk to the department head. If you really want to just stay out of the department, the graduate school has an ombuds person and peer ombuds people. Tom Atkinson, I've worked with for decades now, and he's amazing at being able to help you see the relationship from both sides and understand where the issues are and how you might go about fixing them. And if that's not possible, he knows every rule in the book, wrote half of them, I think. So he will know how to help you get out of that relationship and into another one, if that's what it takes. So, there are practical things to do. If you find yourself in that situation, don't just throw up your hands and give up. There are people here whose job it is and whose passion is helping you fix it.
But in my head, that is the answer to the question, subbing in advisor-advisee relationship. If that relationship has gone bad, there are legal, formal actions that you can take. When a mentor-mentee relationship goes bad, in my head, that's a less formal situation. I don't need a toxic mentor. Period. I'm just going to leave that relationship. Because there are a million brilliant people with great advice that are open to a mentor-mentee relationship on this campus, or just generally in academia. And so I'm not going to say toxic relationship. That's my response to that. I'm not. If you've done the steps of communicating and telling the mentor what you need and the things we've already talked about, I'm not going to fight for a mentor that doesn't want to help me.
And most of the folks that you would talk to here who are mentors, typically faculty members or part of the research staff, they're busy people. If you just quit calling, they'll probably never even notice. I shouldn't say that. If it's a bad relationship, they don't care. You don't have to worry about it.
Just ghost them.
Yeah. If they're more committed to this than you realize, it might be worth an email or a quick note saying, thanking them for the time that they've spent and saying you really valued what they've had to say and that let them know that, you're moving on. Because usually you just don't show up and they don't care. Right.
I guess I'm just gonna echo. So we grad mentoring fellows know that there's a couple of resources that we have available for you. Obviously there's the positive engineering staff, Stephen up here. If you have a problem or if you just want to, check in and assess what the situation looks like. Maybe sometimes it's something that you as a student are doing that contributes to the problem. You don't recognize it. We're all here to chat and help you out. So now I'm going to move on to communication balance, and I think this is a perfect question to segue in with what I was just said. So often faculty members can become overloaded or busy. If a student needs more active engagement and availability, like one-on-one time, how can they best approach the faculty member about the situation?
I would try to reach out to the faculty and see what their schedule is like, so that way, if they share it with you, or at least you would know when they're extremely busy, and after that point, maybe you can set up some one-on-one time as needed. But yeah, try to reach out to them to understand their point of view, their perspective.
I think kind of what we've said before is that faculty are approachable, but they're also busy. So maybe maybe it's grant season and they have proposals they're trying to get written, and so it's not that they're ignoring you, it's that they have 5 things due at the end of the week and they're trying to just make sure everything's submitted on time. So just kind of keeping in mind that faculty are busy. And that sometimes it's okay if you're not the number one priority because you will be next week, but right now they need some additional time. So just being clear and open again of saying like, hey, I could really use some additional time. What does that schedule look like? Is it tomorrow? Is it in a week? When can we set something on the calendar? I personally really like having something on the calendar too, because it's not just word of mouth or over an email that can get forgotten, but it's something set that's going to show up on that day.
Yeah, I agree. Talking with faculty member is the way to go. That needs to be the first step. And one of the things that you might ask is, what is a more effective way that I can make use of what time that you are able to do? Not give me more time, you know, but how can I make more effective use of that time? Do you need to see drafts from me ahead of time? Do you need an agenda for the meeting? You know, try to offer a solution or a plateful of solutions from which they can choose and would make the time that you have available to you more valuable.
Yeah, I was just thinking that some of my more successful mentees have been the ones that show up to meetings with an agenda, right? They show up with, I need to talk to you about 4 things. Item 1. So they just go for it. And those are the most efficient meetings. We're typically done early. And faculty are humans. I find myself prioritizing those students and looking forward to those meetings more because I know they are going to be an effective, valuable use of my time, which is a limited resource. And I would never have favorites. I could not possibly have favorites, but those are my favorites. Every time.
Yes, from my perspective, I would add that if I have an hour allocated and I know I do the whole hour, I will start off my meeting by saying 30 minutes of your time. Because then in the future, I hope that they see that by respecting their time, they will be willing to give me a little bit more if I need to add another meeting in another week. The last question we have is, what separation should there be between work and life relative to the information shared between a student and a faculty member? We're talking about, let's say, there's something personal in a student's life that's impeding their work progression. Maybe that's something that should be talked about, but where do we go?
I think it's important for an advisor to know if there's something that's going to prevent you from reaching like your weekly goals or so last week my father-in-law had a pretty sudden emergency surgery that kind of scared us and we thought he might not make it through it. I texted my advisor and I said, I'm really sorry, I need to cancel our meeting. I am with my family at the hospital right now. That's all I said. And looking back, maybe I could have said things a little bit better. But that was something she needed to know because I couldn't make the meeting and I couldn't send things on time that week. But at the same time, you want to not provide so much information and give, this is the exact surgery, and this is everything that's going on. If you don't need all the details. And I think that balance is important of if it's going to prohibit you from reaching a goal, make sure that they know about it. It can be as simple as like I have a conflict with our meeting because of a doctor's appointment, or it's, I really need some help because I'm struggling and I feel really anxious and depressed this semester. Are there campus resources? Your advisor isn't your therapist, but they should be able to direct you somewhere when you need help or when you have something that's going to prevent you from conducting your research.
And I would also say that it varies student to student and like so I am a mentor and an advisor to my PhD students. Like that's a commitment I made when I started this job. And so my mentees, I have a different relationship with each of them. And I have kind of tailored my mentoring style to each student in my research group based on what they need from me. So one of my students likes to just talk for 20 minutes about stuff. And because they are an incredibly productive student that is just killing it in lab, I give them that time because I know that they need that. They need to feel that relationship with me. So we talk about our lives outside. careful not to overshare. They don't overshare, but I'm aware of what's going on in his life. He's aware of what's going on in my life. Again, with professional boundaries. And I think that makes our mentor-mentee relationship stronger in that case. I have other students, I don't know anything about them outside of lab. Like they just appear magically in the morning and then disappear at night. And that's how they seem to prefer to keep our relationship. So I let them be my guide to establish where that boundary is.
Yeah, as a mentee, you should gauge that relationship that you have with your mentor. And if you feel comfortable to share some life experiences with the mentor, then go ahead and see how they react. And yeah, of course, you want to keep a professional boundary. But yeah, just gauge how they react to that. And if you actually want to have that relationship with that mentor.
One of the things that strikes me is that students will share a lot with a mentor they trust. And I'm an engineer, right? Anytime somebody comes to me with a problem, I want to fix it. I mean, that's just what I do. And you have to recognize as a mentor that there are problems that you're prepared to solve, and there are problems that you do not know how to solve. I mean, if someone comes to me with a mental health issue, I mean, I'm as likely to say the wrong thing as to say something helpful. So I won't solve that one, but I want to make sure that I'm aware of the resources that are available on campus that I can refer these folks to. And you know, sometimes that goes as far as putting on your coat in the winter and walking with them to wherever that resource is, you know, to show that you really do care, even though you can't solve the problem. It really, as you said, it varies from one student to another, how much help they would like. You know.
So that wraps up the questions we have. Anyone in the audience online that would like to ask a question to our panelists?
So we do have some online, so we can go ahead and ask some of those appropriately. And these kind of came in at different points, so you might go back to some of the things that you were mentioning then. First one, what happens when you have that conversation about mentoring styles and wanting to improve that, and they just kind of cut you off and say, you know, that's just my style and you have to deal with it? What should somebody do in that situation?
At least you know what to expect. Yeah, they were being honest. They are saying what they can and can't provide. So at least you know that you're not going to get that from them.
And that's a moment for you to reflect on what you actually need,
Mhm.
right? Is that a deal breaker for you, or is that a framework you can live within? And let that be your guide.
I think again, it depends on if it's an advisor or a mentor. If it's an advisor, that's a 4 to 6 year journey approximately. And if that's something that's going to be really difficult thinking, you know, it's one thing to think about with a mentor, like, okay, they do things a little differently than I'd like, but that's okay. If you're looking at 5 years with someone and it's very different than what you're looking for, it might be time to step back and think if maybe switching to another advisor or maybe having a co-advisor would be more helpful for you. So it just depends on the situation and what type of mentor you have.
Yes, I spent a dozen years in industry before I moved to the university. And in industry, you don't go to the boss and say, gee, I don't like the way you're managing this group, but you change that. You know, it's usually, there's the door. If you don't want to work there, you're welcome to go someplace else, right? So the university mentor or advisor student relationship is more flexible than a lot of others, and sometimes it doesn't hurt to get used to operating, you know, where this is a situation you're going to have to adjust to. It depends. I mean, if it's an abusive situation, no, you don't do that. But if it's just that they like to have meetings on Tuesdays and you like meetings on Thursdays, you know, get over it. Yeah, sorry. That's being a little blunt here, but that's not a good.
Ooh, the next question is thinking about sort of with COVID happening, a lot of our meetings went online. So there are any tips that you may have in terms of how to manage a virtual mentorship relationship? What are some things that helped you navigate some of those meetings?
Having a purpose and an agenda, like for those meetings just makes it that much more productive and, yeah, I would suggest.
I think it depends on the relationship, but my advisor and I during COVID, we both had our cameras on and treated it like a normal meeting. Just kind of pretended we were in the same room, and kind of business as usual. There are times when it's appropriate to have your camera off. There are times when it's better to have it on. And so I think, again, be clear and open and have that communication. What is this going to look like now that we're virtual? I think agendas are really helpful, but just kind of setting those standards prior to having those consistent meetings is going to be really helpful.
And
I've reached a point where I don't see much difference, really. I mean, whether the person is sitting across the desk or whether they're on the computer screen that's across the desk, we get the same amount of work done. I just don't see a lot of difference.
And there are some benefits to virtual meetings, such as the ease with which we can share our screens with each other. That has actually, I think, improved some of the communication. Because if my student's like, I did this and this, and I'm like, no, just make the figure, wait, this way. And I can just like, yeah, it's actually made, I think, some of my more technical mentoring meetings more effective and more efficient.
And I also like the fact that I've said for years that I wish some engineering students would invent the transporter room that Scotty had on, in Enterprise, right? So that I could get from one meeting to another without having to take that 10 minutes to walk someplace. And these virtual meetings essentially do that. So I can get more in a day. It just works out very nicely. So I'm happy.
the last question on the chat is a two-part question. So the first one says, how do you handle a failed mentor relationship, and what things do you take from them going forward into your next relationship?
I think each experience, each mentor I've had, I've grown from. I've learned how I want, like, it's informed my mentoring style. And it's also informed what I need as a mentee, and what I will tolerate and what I won't tolerate as a mentee, and also from my mentees. So a failed mentor-mentee relationship, however you choose to define that, I think I choose to see it as an opportunity for growth.
I think if it's clear that this just isn't the right match, the sooner you can determine that, the better. And then you help the student to find another person who can work with. I guess I don't feel like I own this student. This is my student. We're going to be together no matter what. It's you find out what's best for the student, and then you help them to make that transition. And yeah, you learn from every single one of them. But I like to learn how to identify quickly where this isn't going to work, so the student doesn't waste a lot of time.
And just reflect back on it. What went wrong? Why? Was it just that it wasn't a good match, or was it that there's miscommunications all the time? What was the reason that it went wrong? And then take that into the next one and realize, okay, we were both really bad at communicating, and so we never ended up meeting, and it wasn't productive. Okay, well then maybe set regular meeting times, or whatever it is that caused the failure of the last one, try to make that a more positive aspect.
From a mentee perspective, I will definitely emphasize that. I previously had a project advisor and the situation got really bad. At this point, I reflect on it to say what went wrong, and perhaps was there something that I didn't do or did do that could have made the situation better or the situation worse. And now I think about it as in terms of when I'm a mentor to another student, how do I ensure that that situation doesn't happen, that I don't have a similar situation?
Well, and also for your own professional development, can you think back to where the first red flag was? So again, as she said, like, how do you get out of that faster next time? How do you move on quicker?
Anyone else have any other questions they would like to ask?
I have one. So we have several in here that might be aspiring to be faculty members. We have several faculty members that are joining us online. So when we were talking in some of those questions about, obviously a faculty member who's really interested in being the best they can be will also be a mentor to their students. Some won't. What would you say in advice to anybody who's aspiring to be a faculty member or any of our faculty members that want to be the best that they can be that are joining us online? How should they approach their faculty life by being the best mentor that they can when that advisor mentor doesn't always have to be the same person, but how can they make sure that they're at least having that option open?
I guess I go back to the very beginning where we say it's important that you genuinely care about the person you're mentoring and their professional and personal growth. And that you listen to them so that you understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. I mean, that's probably the key.
And from that, I've actually taken a lot of enjoyment out of sort of setting it as a personal goal for myself to adjust and adapt and kind of figure out, okay, I tried this with this mentee and it didn't work. So maybe I'll try, oh, that technique worked. Yes, let's go with this one. So just being flexible and open to learning and growing as a mentor to constantly improve yourself so you can give to the students more of what they need, I think has been useful. I'm a way better mentor now than I was to my core first student. One doing fine.
One of the things that we haven't talked about here, I just mentioned, is that we've said that you treat each student a little bit differently, but you treat a student differently as they grow. Your mentoring approach to them changes as they grow. And you have to be aware of that growth and where you need to back off, where you need to provide more challenges. So that's an important part of being a good mentor.
Any more questions? Okay, well,
I guess I'll say something. Yeah. I was just going to say that I like the part you guys. This is more of a comment. It's not really a question, but I enjoyed the part where you're talking about giving positive feedback, I guess, to mentees. I think that's really important to note. I know as an engineering student, like the level of criticism I get is here, and then the level of compliments I get is like down here. So generally, when I'm doing something, I turn it in or submit it. I think to myself like, okay, I expect to get criticism from this, right? Like, I eat criticism for breakfast, and compliments melt my heart. So it's good to hear that that's coming from mentors, right? Because it is really nice to get that positive feedback and that affirmation that you are on the right track, you are making progress, and you're doing this, for a good reason, and it's not just to get like a check mark because you met standards, but it's to know that you're blowing those standards out of the water, I guess, at least a little bit, at least by like some small percentage, right? I guess the only other thing I was going to say is, I know this was kind of danced around a little bit, but I think the word you're kind of looking for was initiative. The mentee should really take the initiative. Don't expect your mentor to, always reach out to you and always make sure you're moving towards your goals, right? You do have to take that initiative as a team. That's important. Important for anything in life. Like if you're working as well, and you take the initiative on things as well. And I don't know, I just wanted to kind of clarify that point as well. Taking initiative is an important thing, right? We should all be encouraged to take initiative. So.
I would follow up with that by maybe reversing the feedback. So one of the things that I like to do for my advisor is if he gets an award, or if there's something really good that he does that I really appreciate, I thank him for him, or I acknowledge his accomplishments as well. And it just makes our relationship all better because then we have a mutual understanding that we celebrate not only my milestones, but their milestones as well.
I'll say from the mentee perspective, I literally have a program in Outlook that's titled "You're Gonna Be Okay," and it's just like all of the positive emails that I've received from someone are like, "Hey, I won this award." It goes in that folder, and then on the like really sad PhD days, because we all have them, go look in the folder, and it's like, okay, we've done some good stuff. Like it's gonna be fine. So yeah, I 100% agree that like the positive feedback isn't always the most frequent part of my experience, but it is greatly appreciated, and it's kind of what keeps us going on those records.
If no more comments or questions, then we can have a round of applause for panelists and so for other students who are here online, if you could fill out the survey, we greatly appreciate feedbacks as well as trying to understand how we can better improve mentorship relationships. Thank you.